we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to I guess this is the January live show for Demigods Anonymous, and we have a very special guest with us today as we talk about Magnus Chase and the Sword of Summer. All right. I am going to let Kara and Kier introduce themselves while I put this all on Twitter. So, ladies.
Okay. Kier, do you want to go first?
Sure. Hello, I am Kier from Through the Scrivener. I have introduced myself many times. You probably know who I am. But I read fantasy, classics, science fiction, and an array of other things. And I really like Percy Jackson. Magnus Chase is one of my favorite series by Riordan. And I am very happy that we get to talk about it now.
Yes, Kier has been waiting for this one. You guys probably have heard me mention Kier on multiple occasions on my channel because I'll say things, I'll be like, Kier's going to be mad at me about that. All right, Kara, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Kara from Wild Book Garden, and I have never read the Magnus Chase books before. I have read Percy Jackson and Heroes of Olympus and really enjoyed both of them. I have read either one or two of the Kane Chronicles. I still have no
anything about them.
Yeah, I remember nothing basically. But yeah, I've been meaning to get to this series for ages, so I was super excited to be a guest co-host. And as for what I usually read and talk about on my channel, I'm like all over the place. I really like reading a wide variety of books, but fantasy, historical fiction, and contemporary are probably the ones I read most. And I read across all age ranges. Like, I'm very, very passionate about middle grade books. I feel like people probably know that about me.
Kara is where you want to go if you want middle grade recs, because Kara is talking about them all the time.
Thank you.
90% of the middle grade books I have read.
Ooh, we got people! Fantastic. So you guys know me, obviously, if you're on my channel, probably, I would hope. If not, I'm Margaret. I'm the word nerd. I talk about books and Batman, although not so much the Batman yet. We're working on that. I keep saying that, and then I don't read any comic books, and it is a shame.
You have a bunch of comic books you need to read.
I do. Actually, most of the ones on my shelf I have in fact read. That's why I bought them. So it's just... BookCon? I'd already read those three. I bought them because I'd already read them. Like, I read them as they were single issue. I just prefer the graphic. I know this is going to, like, any really big comic book fans are going to think this is blasphemy, but I prefer the graphic novels to the single issue because it's just easier to read and follow the story. You don't have to, like, it's annoying.
Oh, totally
I was following Batman for a while as issues came out. I'm supposed to be following Catwoman that way, but I haven't been. Anyways, Kinsey will be joining us right now, apparently. Look at that! We spoke Kinsey's name, and here she is!
We summoned you.
There you go.
Honestly.
Perfect timing! I was literally about to say Kinsey will be joining us in a moment. Okay, Kins, do you want to introduce yourself? Shout out your channel a little bit. Everyone else has already done that, so you're special.
Sure. Hi. Whew, sorry. I just got back from the gym, so I'm like, whew. Anyways, my name's Kenzie. I'm from Kenzie Lee T. I talk about books and mainly Percy Jackson. I also do crafts every once in a while. And I also haven't uploaded a video in probably a year, so.
I believe it's been a little over 6 months because I was making my jar of booktubers, and anyone who hadn't done a video in the last 6 months did not go in, and you did not go in. I don't think. No, wait, no,
you did with the Funko Pop that you did in like October of last year, like October of 2018.
I just realized you did make it in because one of our live shows was up on your channel, so you've had one like the last 5 months or so.
I know, because I put you on, like, I get notifications if you ever post, because you never post. And I'm like, one day I'll get a notification.
I recorded the video for the first time in ever, so I feel like I'm getting further in life. We'll see if it actually gets uploaded, though.
All right, so Magnus Chase, y'all. Okay, let's talk who all has, because I know Kara has already said that this is her first time reading it, but who is a first timer? Raise your hand.
Oh, no. Everyone but me.
No, I've read it before. This is my second time.
Oh, yeah. You just haven't finished the series.
I have not. I've read the first book. I used to have my bookmark still here. I'm like 100 pages into the second book, but I put it down and then did not pick it back up. So I know we have a couple of really big Magnus Chase fans who are watching, or at least one of them, because I talked with them earlier. So if you have any questions or anything you want us to talk about this series, go ahead and put it in the comments. I'm going to start out. What was, for those of us that got far enough to have a favorite moment, what was one of your favorite moments? Can anyone guess what mine was?
Any scene with Annabeth in it.
Yes.
Literally, almost every highlight in the first 2 chapters is Annabeth.
Yeah, unsurprised.
It's such a shocker.
Solid choice.
I really do, though, like that, because knowing all of the history Annabeth has with funerals and people showing up at their own funerals, Percy, I just really appreciated that scene. And then the fact that she's like, I could help you with this, but I've kind of learned that sometimes I have to let go of things. I was like, she's grown so much. I love her. Anyways, anyone else have a favorite scene?
I really liked like all the scenes basically where Magnus had those like weird dream conversations with the gods. Like when he had the ones with Loki, I thought those were super interesting, and like I just really like the way they were written. Like that's when I felt like most connected to the setting and like the mythology aspects, is because I don't know, something about the way they were written I really enjoyed. And also the conversation with Hel, I think it was, right?
Yeah, I haven't quite gotten there yet.
Okay, so yeah, I don't want to get into like I guess serious spoilers, but yeah, like the one that
Kinsey is here knowing that she will probably get spoiled, yes?
Oh, always. I come into these things and I'm like, just give it all to me. Let's see if I'll actually read the book.
This is no holds barred. You can talk about anything you want. I may not remember most of it, but I do know that like how kind of how it ended. I know that there's a point where something goes up a giant's nose, and like I remember these random details. I just don't remember what order they are in the story.
Yeah. So those were basically my favorite scenes, is when I remember very clearly the ones with Loki and the one with Hel where she offers him the deal basically to like get his mom back. Yeah, and I also feel like those scenes were when I found Magnus best, not like most relatable, but like I feel like those were the scenes that really connected to him as a protagonist, because he was finally caring about stuff and like taking the story seriously. And yeah, just like the way that the Norse gods were characterized, I really liked those scenes because they were different, but like Rick Riordan like put his twist on them, but they also felt recognizable and they actually felt threatening, which he doesn't always do with his characters. So yeah, I enjoyed that.
I feel like they're much more threatening and much more morally gray in this series than they were in the Percy Jackson series. Also, can we really just appreciate Mimir being El Capo or the Capo?
Oh yeah.
I saw that. I knew exactly who it was because I know a little bit of Norse mythology, and I just started laughing. I was like, oh yeah, I remember who. Like I couldn't remember his name, but I knew who he was in Norse mythology.
Yeah.
So, Kinsey, in the little bit that you have read, what so far has been your favorite kind of what's your favorite thing that stood out to you?
Okay, I'd like it to be noted that I am halfway through. So
good job.
I got further than the first time I picked this book up, which yay. But I do like the dream sequences. I do think those are really fun. I also really appreciated the funeral where we see Annabeth for the first time, and just like the conversations between her and Magnus, I thought were just really sweet and very cousin-like. And also something about the squirrel, them like running away from the squirrel. it just brings me,
fantastic.
It brings me so much joy.
Yeah.
Just so much joy.
Wow.
Can you imagine though how terrifying a giant squirrel is? Like we think, oh, they're cute and adorable, but like also they are rodents and they have these giant chompers. Like
Yeah.
All right. Kier, talk to us about what your favorite part of this book. I saved you for last because I figured you'd be the best.
Yeah, well, the thing was, forgot kind of when things. I was kind of disappointed because I remember a lot more character growth in it because there's a lot more like relationship building in the later books. And then in this book, I was like sad because a lot of the scenes that I thought were in here weren't in it until the second book. And yet there was like scenes between like Sam and Magnus and like Blitzen and Hearth that like I would just start crying because like I know where the relationship goes. And I was like, this scene isn't that like things, but like I just, especially like I really loved Hearth's journey and like I don't know, it's not in the context of the first book. I know that it's not like the best scenes. However, I just found myself, because I'm so emotionally invested in where they go, that I kept on just like tearing up and being emotional in those scenes where it's like it's the beginning of the journey.
Yeah. One of the things I really noticed and really appreciated was that I feel like Rick Riordan's humor has really like come through in this book. I feel like this is much closer to the original Percy Jackson series in terms of narration and the way you connect with the character than it was than either Heroes of Olympus or Kane Chronicles. Kane Chronicles, I still haven't figured out why it felt like there was that like wall between you and the narrator. And then I know that how Heroes of Olympus is like really riding on your feelings of those characters from the first series, honestly. But I did just really like, and I love how it's Rick's trademark sarcastic humor, but it's not Percy's, if that makes sense.
I did notice that, like, okay, because like with the Crane Chronicles, with the Kane Chronicles, I liked the story and like the way that like he explained like all the Egyptian stuff, but the whole time I was reading that book, all I could think of was like, this is just different versions of Percy Jackson. Like, this is Percy's literally just telling me this story in third person.
No, Kane Chronicles is in first person.
It is?
It is.
But it's in first person told through a recorder from different points of views. I
think that's part of it, is that like it's told from the like that they've had a chance to do this recording, so there's not as much of immediacy. You're not as worried. Yeah. So
but it's also weird. Why are they telling these like very personal things to a recording?
Okay, so is this interesting? Because I actually really didn't like the humor in this book. Like I hated it. Oh no! I know, like, because I actually really liked it I really liked it in Percy Jackson, and I actually liked the Heroes of Olympus, like,
it's my favorite series ever.
Yeah. I don't know, like, this one, it just didn't work for me. It felt different to me than the other series I've enjoyed from him. Like, I got so irritated because it felt like almost all of the humor in this book was, like, the same joke format over and over, where a character would use a Norse word, and Magnus would repeat a silly-sounding English word to him. And, like, that was the joke. And, like, once or twice it was funny, but after the, like, 15th time, I'm like, I don't know. I didn't like the humor as much in this one.
There's an Annabeth part. I still enjoyed it. It was probably not. I'm so easily entertained, so I enjoyed it. Like, I will enjoy it as much the first time as the 14th time.
I do think. Go ahead.
I found like there was some humor that hit me and some humor that didn't. I think that a lot of like the things with the Norse words were trying to like help people better pronounce it. That's kind of how I understand it.
Right.
So for me, I knew it was like less of a joke and more of like a way to like pronounce things. But I was still like, there's some humor that I found funny and like some that I didn't.
Yeah, I think that in like those kinds of moments, it was more of like it just kind of reminded me that it was, oh, this is a book for children. Like, it's not. We're not.
I appreciated the fact that he was telling us how to pronounce these words.
No, I totally agree, but I think that like, I mean, even just like reading like YA fantasy versus like kids fantasy, in YA you're just kind of like, you either flip back to the glossary and you're told how to pronounce the word, or you just butcher it and move on. Where Rick really tries to make sure you actually know how to pronounce these things, and so I think that sometimes it's like, oh yeah, okay, I see what you're doing.
This is YA.
In the back.
It's not.
Isn't this YA though? Like, Magnus is like.
I never consider it YA. I think that it's because Magnus is 16, but
Yeah.
the Heroes of Olympus I don't consider YA either, and mostly that's
Heroes of
because
Olympus
I
definitely
don't
isn't.
think that it reads like YA.
Yeah,
Well,
these
like, I think-
definitely read like middle grade.
Yeah. Well, like, and age ranges are stupid designations anyway. Like, I think, like, it's so arbitrary. Yeah, but, like, this book, it didn't feel to me like, I don't know, I hate saying, like, it doesn't feel like YA, because, like, what does that even mean? But I guess it felt more like how he wrote middle grade than how he wrote the Heroes of Olympus books.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But even with that in mind, I still, like, I've read Heroes of Olympus relatively recently, the first couple books, and I think I've read Percy Jackson not too long ago, and I still find those funny. So I don't think it was just like, oh, his humor doesn't work for me anymore. Just something about the way it was done here didn't click with me, I guess.
I think Magnus also definitely has kind of a chip on his shoulder, so his sarcasm is less like, haha, I'm gonna die, so I'm just gonna joke about it, and more like, I'm mad at the world.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think Magnus like grows a lot like through the series and stuff like that.
I hope so.
Like I didn't love him in the first book, but by the end I just really appreciated, and I think he comes into himself and he realizes a lot more like who he is as a character. Because right now he's just like,
yeah.
Yeah,
I think we've got a character that has been
trauma. He's been on the streets for 2 years, and now
well, and
he hasn't had a chance to process anything. He's cut off from his emotions, and I definitely got a sense of that when we were reading this. Like all of the way he was looking at the world. I was like, I can see a kid who's been on the streets since he was 14, after watching his mother die in a flaming, fiery death. I can see this kid kind of trying to distance himself from everything and make everything a joke.
Yeah, but yeah. I had some issues connecting with Magnus, and I think some of that was deliberate. Like you were saying, like, it really makes sense that he approaches the world this way, because the poor kid has had, like, the worst life. Things have been really hard for him. But I think from a narrative perspective, I think it could have been done more effectively, because for, like, 75% of this book, it felt like Magnus didn't care about anything that was happening. So, like, as the reader, I'm like, I don't care. Like, if the protagonist doesn't care, then it's hard for me to get like emotionally attached. And actually one of the reasons I really liked the ending a lot more than some of the other parts of the book is because Magnus finally started becoming like an active participant in the story, and like he started to care about stuff, and he started like making choices, and he was like making his own decisions rather than just like, I don't care about anything. So I think we are starting to see that by the end of the book, and yeah, it's like I understand why he was the way he was, but just from like a storytelling point of view, I'm like, it's really hard to like read a book where even the characters don't care about what's happening.
Yeah, I think he cared about, like, I would say Blitz and Hearth, because you definitely see moments where he's worried about them and like concerned. I think he's attached to Sam, and he feels guilty for like getting Sam kicked out of the Valkyries. But Sam is another completely separate thing to talk about.
I love Sam. Yeah,
I love Sam. But real quick, before we get off of his humor, I just want to point out, I love that he's gone back to these fantastic chapter titles. Like chapter 1 is "Good morning, you are going to die." And then another thing that I love is that I don't know if it's because it's a middle grade series, or he does, oh, look, it's Achilles! Yeah. Or because he does it just for the laughs, I just love that he's like, don't go jumping off any rooftops. Don't run into the highway or set yourself on fire. Like he feels the need, like both Percy and like all of the series that have been first person narration have been like, hey, by the way, I'm about to tell you this huge crazy story. Do not try this at home.
Also, my favorite chapter title, I faint more than Jason Grace. I don't know.
I did not. No, hold on, because I know. I noted that one. What is it? It's I get knocked out. Hearthstone passes out even more than Jason Grace, though I have no idea who that is. That's one of those things that, you know, he just put that in there as a thing for the fans. Like, it wasn't even supposed to make narrative sense, and I just died. Yeah. In the middle of the Panda Express, I died.
I read that chapter title. I'm like, is Jason gonna get a cameo? And it's like, no, he just
there.
Like, he will know who Jason is because, like, he meets both Annabeth and Percy, and then, like, Annabeth tells him her life story, so he will know who she is in the future. Right?
Yeah,
because she's 17 right now, which I love every time he talks about Annabeth being terrifying. I'm like, I just love how many people are terrified of Annabeth. It makes me so.
They're around the same age though, because he's 60. They're only like a year apart.
They're only a year apart, yes. which I don't think that he'd be able to pass this off as middle grade. I think the only reason he was able to pass this off as middle grade is because he is a middle grade writer. And I think he really did capture a middle grade voice in this story. So he made it work, but I do think that like if anyone else had written this series, it would have been YA. They'd have an older tone. All right, so now that we've finished talking about the humor and talking, how did we feel? Let's talk a little bit more about like how we felt about Magnus in this book as a main character. I thought I love him. Like I feel so bad for him. And I also love his snarky sense. Like anytime you have someone with this sense of humor, they're gonna get me. They're gonna get me. I'm gonna be attached to them. So
True.
Kenzie's like, I don't care.
Yeah.
No, I will say that I enjoyed it more like reading it this time than I did the first time I picked it up. And maybe that's just because I understand more about character development and stuff like that. But I mean, I remember the first time I was just so disinterested. Like I didn't give a shit about Magnus. But
Yeah.
I think now, like, I understand like what you're saying about how he's kind of just like, he doesn't really express his emotions. But I do think that like he expresses enough where I'm like, okay, if Rick does this right, by the third book, I'll love you.
Yeah.
But if you do it wrong, I will hate you.
Yeah. Well, and I talked a little bit about my feelings about Magnus already, but I also like the fact that you go into this and you kind of have to read the whole series to understand his character. That kind of bothers me a little bit because like I love like long character arcs. Like those are my jam. But I think you have to have enough done in the first book that you care about them. Like you care about following them into the next book. Because I don't know, like if it had just been based on how I felt about this one without like talking to you guys about it or anything, I don't know if I would continue the series. Because like it took me so long to start caring about Magnus. And even when I finally did, it wasn't so much like, I don't know, it didn't feel like he really had a character arc in this so much as like he didn't care about anything. He didn't want to be here. This whole story was stupid, according to him. And then all of a sudden he cares, which like I liked that he started caring, but it's also like, I don't know, there's not a lot to like I'm a character focused reader. I love characters, so it was kind of hard not being like with him from the beginning. Like I loved Percy from the beginning. I even loved Jason, which I guess is an unpopular opinion. But like
not unpopular in this house.
You what?
I just don't like Jason.
Yeah, he doesn't like Jason. I love him. We're gonna stop there. We're not talking about Jason.
I like him better by the end, but and this is unpopular too because I by accident picked up The Lost Hero before I read Percy Jackson.
Yeah,
and Jason was the first character I met in the Percy Jackson world, and I still don't like him.
See, yeah, I like Jason.
But Percy's the best.
Percy is great. Like also, so I was reading some of the reviews from people who didn't like this book as much, and one of the things they said is that Magnus felt too much like Percy. And I like really strongly disagree with that. I think if you were more like Percy, I would have liked him more. So yeah, like I didn't feel like he was a carbon copy of the other series, which is nice, but it's also like not really a character I
think you see the sarcasm and they think Percy, but like having read the Percy Jackson books more times than I can count. I might have been obsessed with them right out of college. Like his sense of humor is like it's parallel kind of to Magnus's, but it's not the same. Yeah, like he definitely notices things and he sees things differently. Like I see him making observations and talking about stuff that I'm like, oh, Percy would not do that.
Yeah. Well, and also like his personality in general, like I think that Rick did a really important job of focusing on like things that Magnus likes that like Percy doesn't, and the opposite. Like he can't and this is like a thing throughout the thing. Like he can't fight. Like he sucks at fighting. If it wasn't for Jack, he would lose. Like he has no talent athletically. He's not. That's not his power set. And like
I liked that part.
like, random things like that. Like he's going to be like Percy is just really naturally great at hiding.
Yeah.
Right.
And
hear myself.
I did really love that Magnus, even though he's the more like abrasive character, that all of his magic was about like healing and like life and everything. I really enjoyed that. Like the scenes where he used his powers were, I should have mentioned those. Those were some of my other favorite ones. Like I thought that was really cool.
All right, Kinsey, you've been trying to say something. What did you have to say?
Sorry.
No, you guys are fine. No, I think that like one, I don't agree with that review. Like, I think that, I mean, out of like all the book series that we've read in Demigods Anonymous, I think that if there's any one that was like too much, kind of like the first group of books of Percy Jackson books, it was the Red Pyramid.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think that it was just, he was so fresh off of the Percy Jackson bandwagon that he like didn't know almost how to like separate different humors and different characters. So I feel like I think that Magnus, I mean, yeah, he has like certain characteristics of Percy, but like, don't we all?
Yeah.
Trademark Rick.
We're all a little
characteristics. That's
sarcastic.
why you go to Rick Riordan books.
They're all Percy.
Right. We're all fucking Percy Jackson. Just like, I think that like, I could understand how like the sarcasm could be like pointed back to Percy, but I think that he does it like even just like slightly differently. Like Magnus, like you were saying earlier, Margaret, about how like Magnus's humor is more like, oh, okay, let's just, you know what? I'm going to die, so I'm going to die. Like, I don't even, Percy's more like, I'm going to die, but I'm going to laugh about it as I do it. Because
I'm going to call out your crap as I do it.
Right.
That's one of the biggest parts of it is he does it. Oh my gosh.
Right. Where I think that there are slight variations. And I think that like, it's also cool to see how like, yeah, you know, they're both like those, I've had a hard life kind of character, but he did it where they were different. Like you're seeing a different story and you're seeing like, yeah, their lives have both sucked.
I think we're also seeing possibly what like Percy's life would have been like if Sally had in fact died in that first book.
Yeah.
That was the thing that I was thinking about. I was like, he really likes moms dying.
Yes.
And evil relatives.
Right. But I also think that like, I mean, I think that if Sally died, I don't think that Percy would have had another family. Like, I don't think that he would have had someone that he would have like instantly been like, oh, you know what? You're taking me under your wing. I'm gonna trust you. We're gonna do this. Where Magnus
But
is
he
like,
probably would have just been at Camp Half-Blood.
Camp Half-Blood. He would have been okay.
true. But like,
You'd just
I
be
mean,
a year-rounder.
if he died like before he even knew anything, I mean, who knows? Who knows? But I think that like,
It's not a live stream if my phone does not fall at least once.
Yeah.
Okay, great. That's good to know.
now
Several things
a
in
live
my room.
stream.
We're just gonna hold it now.
All right, Kinsey, you want to finish your
But yeah,
thought?
I just think that they're like, I can see how there would be similarities, but I don't think that they're similar enough to be like, this is just another telling of Percy Jackson.
Right. Well, and there are some things I actually wrote down in my notes. Like there are a couple of things where I think, at least for me, it did feel a little bit too much like Percy Jackson, but they were not related to the main character. Like I think Magnus is a very distinct main character. And even if there's like little parts of his voice that feel like it, I think it's, yeah, like you're saying, Kenzie, I think it's different enough that it doesn't feel like he just rewrote the series with Norse mythology.
Yeah.
Right.
If you want to see the protagonist that is the most like Percy narratively, actually you series Big Red Tequila is the first book, and that is literally like Percy Jackson as an adult. I loved it. But it was literally, I was like,
first book.
yeah, it was, I think it was. I also want to know where Rick keeps getting this idea. Like, I really need to know the backstory behind Rick and his wife, because he keeps having these romances that involve, and he likes these romances that have, because I remember the quote where it was talking about no one calls someone an idiot that many times unless they really like them. And I was just like, Rick, I need to know more about the backstory between you and your wife, because I feel like That would.
He's literally just telling us the backstory.
Like,
Yeah.
y'all need couples counseling or something.
Well, no, because Annabeth is actually based off of his wife. So yes, well, Mrs. Richards
wife is
mentioned that he looks like Kurt Cobain. That was intentional. I think you probably would know that. So, okay. So, what did you guys think about the cast of characters that we get in this book besides Magnus? Did you guys have a favorite besides him?
Magnus is
I have them, but
so also Samira.
Samira? I really like Samira. I actually thought she was going to be the love interest at one point.
I did too. I kind of appreciate that we're not doing that because it's something different, but it's also like she was my favorite character in the book and I wanted more time with her. like Magnus, where are you the narrator? What's that character?
She's definitely
you get more time with her in later books.
Okay.
Yeah, that's one of my big disappointments because I remember her being more in this book and I forgot that she was more antagonistic in this book and we don't see enough from her. And I was like, my goodness, I miss her.
Yeah.
But they do have that, like, he and Samira did have that very Percy and Annabeth type relationship where they're like taking the piss out of each other constantly. And I love relationships that start out like that. And then like you start to like them and you're like, oh crap. And I was like, anyways.
Yeah.
Nope, they're just great brother-sister vibes.
Yeah, I like their relationship, and I wasn't, like, thankfully, I was not so invested in that. I think that's part of why I put Hammer of Thor down, is because I realized that wasn't happening. I was like, oh, this is where we're going. I'm not as interested in this. But I think I'm finally ready to, like, actually sit down and read it. Listen, if you mess with my ships.
I know. You never should mess with your ships. I know.
Well, the love interest comes in book 2.
Yes, because I do know who that is.
And they are my favorite.
Yes, I tend to deal better with that kind of plotline where if I know that the love interest doesn't show up until book 2 or book 3, Sarah J. Maas. So mad about that. I'm like, you're wasting my time with these pointless romances in this book.
Yeah.
See, I am the exact opposite. I just find it super unrealistic that like the one person is in one relationship ever. And like one of my favorite tropes is when there's like multiple love interests, or there's a love interest in like book 1 and then they're like gone or like something like that.
I think when it's done well, that's one of my favorite tropes, but a lot of times I feel like it's not done well. And I also feel like when you're reading
Gallagher girls.
I also think like when you're reading a book, like you accept that the relationships are going to be a more significant part of their life than in real life. You know, like, yeah, in real life, people don't stay with one person. But if I were reading a book and I got, like, super invested in a romance, I'd be pretty mad if they were like, oh, yeah, then we graduated and I never saw them again. Like,
that's my thing.
But that happens in books, and it's so good. Like, I know several books that do that, or, like, I know that Margaret specifically stopped reading the series because of this, but I know me and Kara both like it, which is The Lend Leaf. Which does that, and I love it.
It's not the romance that made me stop reading it. It was I found out what happens in the last
told me it was
book.
a romance.
But
you were screaming at me, and I was in class.
Romance, but I was like, why am I rooting for this character if this is what's going to happen to her at the end of the? I'm not putting myself through that.
I love that series.
I'm sure you do. I could not stand Adelina, and then I found out what happens at the end. I was like, you know what? This isn't worth my time. I've got better things to read. My thing is, I don't mind having other love interests because I do think that is realistic. I just want to have someone who I can root for from book 1 through the rest of the series is typically how I like to do it. One of my favorite series, the love interest doesn't come in until the second book. However, like, she hit it so hard with, like, she hit the ball out of the park with this boy. I was just like, who cares about Josh? Zach is it. So, and he is legitimately one of my favorite love interests in all of history because he's just so cool and suave and spy, and I love it.
Wow.
Wow.
Anyway, he just, like, I was reading this like, I discovered it while I was in college, but I was still kind of that age where I still related more to, like, the teenage self. So, like, by the time we got to the end of the series at the end of college, I was like, yes, I would legitimately date this kid. So,
Percy Jackson.
That's not creepy at all, Margaret.
We were only 2 years age different at that point. He was 18. I was like No, we were 4 years. He was 18, I was 22. Same
That's
difference.
terrifying.
But like,
I'm 22, and I know 18-year-olds who hit on me, and I'm like, do you realize how old I am? Get away from me. You are a child. Please stop flirting with me. I feel like a predator.
My favorite is when you see a guy from behind, you're like, oh, he's hot. And then he turns around, you're like, oh, you're a baby.
Story.
I'm like, never mind.
Where am I?
That's what was me and Will Herondale as well. I would legitimately have married Will Herondale. But again, we were close in age at the time I read the
Don't
series.
spoil me. I haven't read them yet.
You're in for such a treat. He is probably my favorite male love interest.
Ever?
Interesting.
I
I've heard
would
not great things about him.
I would not, in fact, actually want to date Percy. I would date Will.
I would, date Nico, except for, he's 12 and also gay. But
Right.
my heart is I will be like 14 when I read it.
If came up to me and
Let's
was like,
see, who?
go on a date, I would drop literally everything. I would sacrifice my cat for Percy Jackson. And that's saying
That's
something.
creepy, Kinsey.
No offense to Killian, but
Fictional characters I would date, I think at this point, are Will Herondale, Adrian Ivashkov,
I love Adrian.
Dick Grayson, and Kakashi from Naruto.
I only know one of those characters.
You know Dick Grayson. That's Robin.
Yeah,
First Robin?
I know two of those characters. Technically, I
didn't-
only read about one.
Yes. Well, Richard John Grayson is literally, except for the fact that he sleeps around a bit, my favorite. Like everything I want in a man. Dark haired, good sense of humor. Yeah, that's it. That's basically it.
Like those are them.
Very smart. Like, he's
I would say that you probably want to be like slightly more picky when actually choosing a man.
probably yes.
Okay.
There's lots of dark-haired, humorous guys that are not the best people.
No, they're not. I mean, if we're gonna really get into it, like, there's a lot more criteria. But if we're looking at, like, definitely we go on a date with Dick Grayson. And also, he is one of the best human beings. He is literally the purest, like, in canon, he has literally been called the purest character in the DC universe. I love it. Like, no one in the DC universe hates him, and it's fantastic.
Where are we going?
Just all of his exes who slightly hate him but also still love him.
No, even his exes love him. Like, there will be times when, like, where they've just broken up and they're mad at him, but, like, literally everyone in the DC universe, if you were a good guy, like, he's friends with everyone. And he is so kind. But this is not about Richard Grayson. We're not talking about him. Okay, so one of the other things I really do want to cover is, what did you think about how he handled Norse mythology in this? I love the fact that every time he tackles a different mythology, it is slightly different.
This is one of my favorite, because I think that Kara's right when it says that the gods seem much more like Frey, and also like more like frightening a little bit. And like even like Frey, like this is the first time we've really had like a father of a main character that's like, did anyone really know anything about Frey?
Right.
Like I knew he existed.
I did.
As Freya.
I knew more about Freya, but I did like I read a bunch of Norse mythology stuff way back when I first graduated out of college. And so I did know I am familiar when I read this was familiar with a lot of the stories that they had. So
yeah, I know some about Norse mythology. It's not the kind I'm most familiar with. And I felt like mixed about how it was handled in this book. Like I talked about, I really liked the scenes that were like one-on-one where the gods actually felt like threatening. And Magnus actually was like taking the situation seriously. But overall, I don't know, like the scenes with Thor, I thought were kind of stupid. Like
I remember that. But Thor also in Norse mythology, like Marvel Thor is much smarter than Norse mythology Thor.
Right, like he's kind of the dumb jock. Yeah.
He is an absolute idiot.
Still, it was a little much at most times. Like I agree with that.
Yeah.
So I think he was probably trying to make him not like Ares, like as not like because Ares is one completely different vibe. But yeah, Thor is I mean, a complete idiot in Greek in Norse mythology,
Yeah.
and it's hilarious, and I love it. So,
Yeah.
I thought I was done well.
So far,
I came in, so I took mythology. I took mythology twice in high school because I was a nerd.
okay, I took it a
You
couple
had multiple
times.
mythology classes.
Right. I don't think anyone should feel bad about being a nerd like on this live stream. So.
Nerd is not.
but
I mean,
like,
my channel literally is the word nerd, and I have Leet Speak in my channel title. So
that's true. No, but so like, but even then, like we learned about Norse mythology and like we covered it. So like I know the basics, but I do not know like all of the intense like in between myths.
Yeah.
And I think it does a really good job at like introducing you. And also like I do think at the same time though, like you kind of have to know a little bit almost, because like had I not known anything, I would be so confused about the tree and the 9 worlds.
Yeah.
And like they mentioned Ragnarok so much, but they don't really like explain it.
I think they call it Doomsday a couple of times.
And so I was just like, had I not actually known what Ragnarok was, I would be like, okay, whoa.
Like when it first says that like Ragnarok is just the end of the world, like
yeah, it talks about like they're continually talking about the fact that like Surt is trying to bring about the end of the world. He wants to. You might not have gotten there by now, but like there's an entire section where they're talking about like why would Surt want to destroy the world? He's like, who knows? Fire giants. They just like to consume stuff. He wants to burn the world down. He's been waiting for this since the beginning of time. It's like, oh, okay.
It's just like at least in like the beginning, like I don't think like if I'd known just even like the basics, I would be a little bit lost.
Yeah.
I like that.
I almost feel like he like this felt like a really long book, and I almost feel like he tried to put too many Norse cameos in this one. Like,
yeah, I'm like, who are we gonna have left for the next book?
Yeah, and like I can tell you guys, probably my least favorite scene is that stupid seagull thing. That was like the most pointless side quest ever. Like, and I assume it's going to be important later because like the character straight up tells Magnus like, yeah, basically I'll see you in the next book. Like, but
hey, are you talking about the eagle?
He called him like a pigeon or something, or a seagull at one point, but maybe.
He was an eagle. Are you talking about Utgard Loki, the guy who gets the apple for?
Yes, yeah, because it wasn't Loki, it was somebody else, and yeah, like there were a couple of places where it's like I assume this is going to be important later in the series, but it kind of feels like we're just like wasting time so that we can get closer to the Ragnarok deadline, which is clearly when the climax of the story is going to happen. I don't know, like it just because like I know in Percy Jackson it was like a very similar setup, like there was like a prophecy and you only had a certain number of days, but it didn't feel as artificial to me because
you had the same amount. You had a week on that one as well.
I think
yeah.
They used 14 days in the first one, but they spent half of the time in the Locust Hotel.
I think like, the Percy Jackson ones is like if you look at especially the first book, like if you look at the books, they follow classic mythology. I mean, the first one is the tale of Perseus. The second one is the Odyssey. So I think that like I don't know. I think like that's one of the reasons why I like that series just so much because it's literally just like a modern day version of these classic tales, and you're still learning things. And I don't know enough about like Norse mythology to say like, oh, this is almost like a retelling with little bits and twists of this story of Norse. But I think that's one of the reasons why that first series is so strong.
I also think that we have things with the Greek mythology, like we have the Odyssey, we have the Iliad, and we have because if I recall correctly, for Norse mythology and also for Egyptian mythology, they don't have stuff. The stuff that has been saved is more like these little stories, these little things that have happened. And it's not so much like these great, huge epics like the Iliad. or the Odyssey.
Well, Norse.
Egypt has a few, but for the most part, it's more like piecemeal, I think.
Yeah, well, Egypt, there's a lot that like they
Norse
can't figure
only
the
has
entire.
It only has the 13 stories. That's all we have of Norse mythology. It
Yep.
has
Yeah.
references to a lot of stories we don't have, but like I think there's only 13 stories in total that are still like alive.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And like Egyptian mythology, there's a lot of confusion because different eras of Egypt would have different ideas, and they don't have one like true through line.
Yeah.
Which I think is why he relied so much on the whole Egyptian pharaoh kind of myth thing going. Did that make sense? I don't know.
It did.
I like how I'm nodding like I finished the Kane Chronicles. Like, yeah.
So I think he doesn't have that resource necessarily for.
Yeah, I mean, I get that, but I think that
languages.
I don't know. I think that it's almost like you can kind of tell that he doesn't have that outline already,
Mhm.
and so like while it's still like a strong story, he's like, oh, let's add this bit for funniness, and you're like,
I do think they're also maybe a little bit too long because I
Yeah,
feel like the Percy Jackson books and the Heroes of, at least for me, the Heroes of Olympus were like, because I wanted more, but like I felt like the Percy Jackson books were just perfectly paced.
Yeah, well, and like pacing is something I rarely care about, but it made it obvious in this book that there were like huge chunks of the book, like that like bird detour. It took like how many pages was that? Like 70 or something?
About when they go and they wrestle the world serpent, right?
Yeah, but it wasn't just that part because it was the lead up to that, and then they had to go and like find. Was that when they talked to the guy who was like a reanimated head too? I don't remember. But
it was right after.
Okay, so there were like a few scenes like that where I'm like, I think I would enjoy this more if I felt like it had any bearing on this book. But so much of it, like he knows that everyone's gonna read the whole trilogy probably. Like he doesn't feel like he has to like get you, like give you like more of the full story. I guess like
He also knows that he has the full trilogy. I think that's what's going on. Is because he knows that there's stuff that he can put the.
Yeah, and I guess I don't feel like there was enough. Like this book doesn't stand on its own very well, to me at least, compared to a lot of the others I've read from him. Like, and I agree with Margaret, and I think Kira, you said this too. Like, I think his strongest books are the shorter ones because everything, like every scene is important. And I was always really impressed at how much character work he could do, even with like action scenes and plot stuff. So I feel like I noticed like gaps more with this book where I'm like, this scene doesn't really accomplish anything.
Yeah. And I do feel like go ahead.
With the head, it really sets up the fact that that's why Blitzen and Hearthstone were following Magnus for 2 years because they were due to that guy. It also sets up the thing about how Hearthstone has magic when that hasn't happened in thousands of years. And the quest to get the sword, that was when they get Jack, the Sword of Summer, is when they're with the sea goddess.
Yeah, and I like that.
And that's also how we introduce some of Samira's background too. Is that I feel like he does a good job of like, even though I do feel like we are taking too much time maybe with some of this stuff. Like it would be better if it was a slightly shorter book and we weren't taking quite as much time with stuff, and having quite as many like side quests. Because I'm sitting there going like, oh my gosh, there's another side quest. Are we not caring about the end of the world now?
Yeah. Also, like
yeah.
Yeah, and I got kind of tired about them being like, oh no, like we have like 4 days when we just slept through a whole day. And I'm like, I know you're not going to get there until the last second because that's always what happens. Like, stop acting like you have like 2 weeks. We know it's going to be at the last minute.
They've already established that they can't even get to the island until the last day.
Right.
I do feel like it's missing that kind of immediacy that you have in the Lightning Thief and that stuff.
Yeah.
So.
I agree.
Anyways, Kira, you were going to say something, I think.
Oh, I was going to say anything else. Unless we have more of that. Like, do you want to discuss, like, do you guys, like, have thoughts on, like, Sam or, like, any of the others about, like, representation or representation of disability? Anything on that?
I do not share any of the identities that are represented with these characters. Yes. I do like the fact that he's putting in there. I do like the fact that he has sign language in a book, and I really think he does a good job
of
describing it. So that I took it when I was in middle school, so I do still kind of have an understanding of how it works to some extent, and I like how he's covered like explaining all of it.
I
Yeah.
also think it was kind of cool how, like, I don't know, like there were moments when they were signing and he made it sound like it was the coolest thing on the planet, and I loved that. I loved that he like was like, this disability, like, it is not a hindrance. It is like you
It's just another
you
language.
want to know how to do sign language.
Yeah.
Because it's so fun.
Yeah.
So I really liked that.
I love the fact that Samira is Muslim and she's also a Valkyrie.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually, like, this is something I assume we're going to get in the later books. And I know he can't fit, like, all the character stuff in one book. But I really would have loved to see explored more, like, that overlap, because I find that so fascinating. Like, the way that she can be, like, a practicing Muslim and also serve the Norse gods. Like, I just find that so interesting. And I wish we had gotten, like, at least a little bit of an explanation for that, because like nobody even asked her about it, which I thought was weird. Like Magnus is always asking people like questions about stuff, so I was kind of, I guess that's more of a personal question, so he wouldn't have done that. But
he does ask her about the hijab at one point, and I actually really liked how she handled it, because she handled it like, I like the fact that she kind of handled it like she's still making up her mind about where she stands with that, because I know that there are various schools of thought when it comes to hijab. So I like the fact that he didn't make it like, oh, I have to wear this all of the time. It was more like, I'm still figuring out how I feel about this and how it's going to fit into my life.
I was going to say, I felt like, I know that like in the beginning, like I know that she is like portrayed as Muslim because I read spoilers for the whole series, but but like in the beginning I was kind of intrigued about how like one moment like she would wear her hijab, and then like the next, like at least when they're in the hotel, like she was taking it off every once in a while, and I was like, okay, like I kind of want to see how this progresses.
Yeah, at the beginning of the second book, she explains that because it is like in Muslim communities, you don't have to wear your hijab with like with females and or family members that are male. And she explains that in the hotel or like other Norse people, she considers her extended family. Thus, she doesn't feel like she wears it because, again, like that is the actual rule. Normally in Muslim communities, is you don't wear it with family members. So
yeah, if you are Muslim and you do and there's a lot of debate on whether or not, even among Muslims, on whether or not hijab is something that should still be practiced. I don't know that I follow her anymore, but Mona El-Tahalway is a very strong criticizer from inside of Islam. And one of her things is she's like, I understand it's part of my religion, but until it is as easy for a woman to take it off as put it on, I feel like no one should wear it. And it's gotten her a lot of flack. But her most recent book is 7 Deadly Sins for Girls and Women.
That one.
7 Necessary Sins for Girls and Women. And then like the one I read was Headscars and Hymens. And it was a really good book. It was really good writing. She has a lot of really interesting thoughts if you want to check those out. But I kind of knew the thought train behind that.
I've known that was how
I knew that.
Like the hijab worked, but I didn't. It's good to know that like it's addressed, because I was kind of like, okay, like yeah, I can see like how it would be, but at the same time, so I'm glad that at least in the second book he kind of is like, this is why.
Well, I had a roommate who was a practicing Muslim, and she did not wear hijab, but that was partly a personal choice because we lived in Florida. And she's like, it just is too hot. If I was truly a good, basically, she's like, if I was truly a good Muslim, I would wear it. But like, I don't feel the need to be that uncomfortable. It would make me miserable. And, so it was really interesting to kind of see her navigate that.
Well, I have several Muslim friends, and like about half of them wear hijabs and half of them only wear them when they pray. Because that's really like most Muslims agree, like it's a personal choice. Like, you can wear it, but you have to wear it when you pray, but other times it's kind of optional.
Yeah. And that's the feeling that I got from Sam. So, all right. I just want to talk about this one sentence that really made me laugh. And that's the fact that they're talking about Thor still holds a grudge that Jesus never showed up for that duel he challenged him to. I died.
I loved that. That was like my favorite joke, probably one of them in that book. Yeah,
Hilarious.
I thought, like, yeah.
I love how he finds ways to like talk about like Christianity even in these books, like because he knows that it's something that needs to be discussed. Like,
right. Yeah, I thought that was a really funny and clever way to like address it without making it like an issue, you know? Like I thought that was really cool.
It really did feel like something Jesus would do. He'd be like, what? You're not even important, dude, and just like ignore him.
Like not even like not important, but it's like a duel is not really his style. Like,
bigger things to worry about right now. I'm getting crucified. So, anyways,
like there's literally a part of the Bible where like Peter shoots people to stop the cross happening, and Jesus is like, "No, man," and heals the man that he just injured.
yeah.
Like I'm not really about this thing.
Yeah. So I just really like I appreciated that. It made me laugh. I love Rick Riordan's humor. I think he does such a good job of it.
Yes.
So are there anything else that we want to address? Is there anything else that the audience wants us to discuss? We have 5 people watching. So if there's any, well, actually 3 of them are probably you guys, but here because she commented recently.
I do want to mention, like, real quick, so we talked about this earlier about, like, the criticism that, like, Magnus is too Percy, and, like, none of us really feel like that. There were a couple places I feel like this did feel a little too much like Percy Jackson, and I wanted to see if you guys felt like that, too, because the ones that I wrote down, let's see, are, where is it? Oh, one of the big ones is, like, the Clarice doppelganger, who I cannot even remember the name of. I think it's, like, Gunilda? Yeah.
Gunilla.
Like, her whole character just really annoyed me because she kind of felt like a prop to like she was an obstacle, and then I guess we're in spoilers territory. Then she dies, and like it is upsetting, but I feel like I get the feeling that like we're supposed to be like really broken by this, and it's like we barely know her, and her only purpose was to like make life difficult for everybody, and she's the reason that everyone else in her group got killed because she was like so unwilling to change her mind about something. So anyway, she was not my favorite.
I forgot she existed.
Yeah, like she was not super important except as like a generic villain.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, I actually liked the scene with her early on where she's talking to Magnus at Valhalla, and it seems like she's going to be more of a like she's a rule follower, and obviously Magnus isn't. So I liked when it was the book kind of made it seem like she was going to be like an antagonist maybe, but that eventually they could find common ground because ultimately they believed in the same things and trying to prevent Ragnarok. And then that didn't happen. It was like, oh, she's just like following orders. She doesn't think for herself at all until the last minute when she turns around to help them. It's like, I'm glad she did that, and I don't want to, it's not like I wasn't affected by her death at all. Like I did think it was sad, but I don't know. I think it would have been a lot more effective if she felt like a fully developed character.
Yeah. I feel like we just didn't have enough time with her for that to really matter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
She definitely was one of those like kind of prop type characters that she was there to serve a purpose for the plot and not necessarily to be a character in and of herself. I think that's also how Clarice starts out.
Yeah.
And then it's not until book 2 that we actually get to see her develop. But obviously we're not going to get that with Gunilla.
Right.
So.
Yeah.
How did you guys like the X reveal?
The what reveal?
The X Odin reveal.
That X is a son of Odin?
No, that X is Odin.
Oh,
I forgot that happens.
Yeah, I forgot. I think I know. I did finish it. I think I guessed something like that, like a few pages before it happened, because there was like one reference. I forget what it was, but I was like, oh, I'm like, Odin has to be around. Like, I bet he's been here the whole time. And then they were like,
I remember he shows up. I'd forgotten that X was. I do not know what you were agreeing with, Miss Richard Reeds. I don't know. I do. I remember him showing up because that's what Odin does. Is just Odin is like there in the background, and then he'll like, oh hey, we're gonna show up and cause chaos.
Yeah.
Well, I just love that he comes in as this like half troll who's like very discriminated against, and then just spends like weeks or months just living in a hotel to see if he likes how it is.
Yeah.
Same. That's what I would do if I was a god.
Right? Just like undercover boss, just like show up and
Right? Undercover mission.
yeah.
That would be really funny.
So,
okay,
like-
anything else? Were there any other moments that you felt like the felt similar to Percy Jackson, or no?
It was mainly that was the main one and kind of the general structure, but that didn't bother me. Like the thing about what we talked about before about like a series of fetch quests essentially, or like, you know, detours that didn't end up mattering. That it didn't bother me that it was similar. I think it bothered me that with Percy Jackson, I loved the character so much that I'm like, I don't really mind. Like this is fine. And the books were a lot shorter, so I think it was less obvious that there was like just killing time. So yeah, it wasn't so much the similarity itself that bothered me there.
I think it's also a little bit better structured because they are always continually trying, in Percy Jackson, they're always continually trying to get over to LA in the Lightning Thief, like, and it's they'll be like, hey, we're on the bus, and then the bus blows up, and so now what do we do? How do we continue? And with this, the way it is structured, it does feel like, hey, okay, we're gonna go, like, it feels less like a linear path and more like, hey, we're here in this central place, and then we're gonna go here, and then we're gonna go here, and like it feels more like a starburst kind of pattern.
Yeah, and like and kind of like they're just gonna wander around until the next plot point happens.
So
and I do think that this book is the longest out of the series.
Oh, okay.
I believe
All
it
of
is,
the
because I know
other ones are under 500. So
this is also under 500. This is 491 pages, but it is definitely this sticker is still on this. These are definitely shorter. Why are you laughing?
in my version, this one is like 540 or something, and the others are all in the 400s.
Yeah, this is 459. Well, I don't know what Goodreads says. I look at like what the actual page count is. Okay, so speaking of the rest of the books, our next book that we're reading for Demigods Anonymous is Magnus chasing the Gods of Asgard, The Hammer of Thor. We're gonna deal some more with the big dumb schmuck.
Do you guys have any desires or wishes or predictions going through? Because basically none of you have read it. Like Margaret read 100 pages a long time ago, but other than that,
My desire is that I finish it.
I just want more Annabeth, and I want to sass off. I don't know that I will necessarily get an actual sass off. I know they do meet, but I want to sass off between Percy and Magnus.
Do they meet in this book?
Not in this book. They meet in the last
book.
You gotta keep
Another book to see my man?
Well, he's in the first chapter of the third book.
I honestly am just reading for Annabeth. Like, it was so funny because I was like, I really don't care if Percy shows up. I'm sorry, Kinsey. But Magnus Chase, if Annabeth Chase is not part of this series, I will be mad. And I do know she's a little bit more of a part in this one, if I remember correctly.
I remember, like, the day this was announced back in the day, and, like, I saw Chase, and I was like, what?
Yeah, I know. I was like, yes. Now we just, oh, yeah, okay. Now we just need another sequel series about Percy and Annabeth's kids, because they will be the most hilarious parents. Like, he will be so stressed, and it will be hilarious watching him be stressed, but also trying to be.
This is his, like, first year ever where he has no books. Rick Riordan has no books coming out in 2020.
Really?
Ooh.
Interesting.
No, because in 2021 he has the last Hidden Oracle book.
Comes out.
Hidden Oracle. Yeah, book comes out in September, and then he has no more series that are active. So I don't know if he's like just focusing on Rick Riordan Presents, because there's no more books that are announced.
I wouldn't blame him if he, considering like what his publishing schedule has been since he started since he started Kane Chronicles, because there have been places where he's had several years where he's had 2 books in a year. I wouldn't be surprised if he was taking a time off. I think the only time that he had like 3 in a year, it was like the Percy Jackson's Greek Gods or Greek Heroes, that kind of thing. Like they were the side books that didn't they're not these.
Yeah,
I think that like the year he finished the year he finished Heroes of Olympus, like 6 months later he came out with, or like 5 months like a few months later that spring, and then, or wait, no, I was going to say that spring he came out with Magnus Chase, and then he came out, like, I think Magnus Chase, the first book in Hidden Oracle, and the last book in Heroes of Olympus was in a 12-month year, but it wasn't in a, like, 1 year, but it was in 12 months.
Yeah. I don't entirely remember, because I do know that, like, at least he started out.
Sorry, cat fight.
I do know that, like, the, because he finished Heroes of Olympus and he went right into Magnus Chase, I think. And then I don't think the Apollo series came out until the next 12 months, because I remember like being like, oh, there's no more Percy Jackson books, and oh, now we have another Camp Half-Blood book, and then being like, oh, I'm not as interested in that, and then like Magnus Chase was the only one that was there for me. So anyway,
yeah, you're right, because my last year of high school was the last of the, like, was the Blood of Olympus, and then Magnus Chase came out my first year in the fall, and my end of my first year, Hidden Oracle came out. You're right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Same.
So I think he's only ever had like 2 books come out. All right. So thank you so much, Kara, for joining us and bringing your cats, even if they've barely shown themselves. We appreciate cats.
Oh my god, you guys. They're like fighting again. I'm so sorry. Thank you for having me and my crazy cats who were not supposed to be in here.
Yeah.
Welcome.
So we will figure out when the next live show is, because I am never on top of these things, and then it really doesn't matter.
On Leap Day and or the next weekend, but
it cannot be on Leap Day. I have plans, so it'll probably
so then it'll be the next week after, which is the 7th of March.
We will talk about that later. So we will announce on Demigods Anonymous when the next live show is. I will try and be on top of like actually letting you guys know ahead of time when it's going to be, at least a couple of weeks out. So thank you so much for watching, guys. Happy reading, and I will see you later, or we will see you later, and we will talk about more wordy, nerdy things. I should have hit the button there. Bye.